I'm not sure if you're familiar with it or not, Matthew, but we run the Brett and Ray Naked Real Estate podcast,
Oh, very
and
cool.
yeah. Um, so right now, you just have me. Sorry, but anyway, um,
It's okay.
but by way of quick introduction, I'll
Yep.
tell you what I know about you, and you
Sure.
fill in the gaps.
Yep.
I would love to say that I bring as much energy as Jason Kelsey when he does his intros, but
Ah,
no, not quite. But background, worked out of Queens Park, and then moved to the association side with the Ontario Real Estate Association, where you were a huge advocate of realtors in the province of Ontario and fought for lots of great legislation, and then branched off to create Real North strategies. And now you're working with associations like One Point and others. Key points that I missed there that you'd like to fill in the
no, you
gaps?
covered it. Yeah.
All
So,
right.
so background in politics and advocacy, almost 20 years altogether. Working in the space, but a lot of that in real estate and housing, almost all of it in real estate and housing, which is really fantastic because now that I've started the firm, I have an opportunity, as you said, to work with associations like One Point, continuing to work on some of the issues that we worked on while I was at AREA, and more. I think increasingly, and I mean, I'm sure we'll talk more about this today, increasingly at the local level of government, which seems to be where a lot of the challenges that we're having around housing affordability and supply exist. So it's great to be able to offer that set of expertise and that set of knowledge to help our clients navigate those at times challenging conversations. But it's been
Absolutely.
fantastic to do.
Well, that's awesome. Just for my own sake, what would you say was your most exciting time at Queens Park?
Oh gosh, so when I worked there, or when I just in
Yeah.
terms of when I've oh gosh, so as a young intern, I worked with he went on to be Speaker of the House, a gentleman by the name of Dave LaFac. I don't know if folks, he was a Brantford MPP, and MPPs have the opportunity to introduce private members' bills through the course of their terms in office. And Dave took on this issue that was really important to the Ukrainian community when he was in office. It was called the Holodomor Memorial Day Act, and so it was this bill that would create a day in Ontario's sort of official calendar of holidays, acknowledging the tragic Holodomor, which was essentially a genocide of the Ukrainian people by the old Soviet Republic, decades ago. Um, Obviously, a very tragic issue for the people of Ukraine and anyone of Ukrainian descent, which in Dave's writing at the time there still is a large portion of folks from that community. So as an intern in his office, I was sort of given this responsibility of working with him and his local constituents to help draft this bill and interview folks from the riding who had experienced and lived through that terrible time. And so that was obviously a really rewarding experience helping Dave draft that legislation. I remember he invited me, and again, I'm just an intern at the time. I'm not really anyone senior or important, to sit in the gallery and watch the debates on the bill. And it was the first bill, if I'm not mistaken, certainly in modern times, that received all party support in the legislature and passed. It didn't pass third and final reading that session, but it did eventually in a session a little bit later on. So that was just really rewarding. I mean, you work on so many things when you work in political offices. It really is. It's a whirlwind of a time. It feels like you spend a year and it feels like a couple of years of work anywhere else. But that was certainly one of the most rewarding times and rewarding things I did when I worked up there.
And how would your role at Queens Park have been different from your counterparts at in Ottawa? Like I'm always curious, just the different levels there, how vastly different or similar they would be.
Yeah, I think the roles are fairly similar in terms of being a political staffer and supporting your member of parliament or member of provincial parliament or your minister, or if you're working in the prime minister's office or the premier's office. I mean, those roles aren't too different. What I think what are different are certainly the issue sets. So nationally you're dealing with defense and trade and all obviously the issues that are in the national government sort of portfolio, and which they have direct control over. Although housing, I mean, we'll talk about it today. I'm sure housing is increasingly an area where the federal government's re-engaging and doing more things on. So there's obviously a little bit of overlap there. But provincially, it's healthcare, it's education, it's transportation, it's post-secondary education, obviously, and so the issue sets I think are different. But the work, I think, by and large, of a political staffer, whether that's in Ottawa or in Ontario, it's largely the same. And that's one of the reasons why you see so much. So folks who worked at Queen's Park will go on to work in Ottawa. So if there's a conservative government in Ontario, and then one gets elected in Ottawa, you'll see a lot of folks move to Ottawa to take up jobs and work in that new administration. That's in part because those skills are very transferable in terms of working in politics and doing those different jobs. So yeah, a lot of very similar responsibilities in the two different places.
Yeah, one of the folks that helped Stephen Harper, and I won't say any names, but one of my favorite offers that I was ever part of, and I was just on the mortgage side for this, but the offer was conditional, if you can imagine, on the results of the election. But the clause was so vague that even after the election, the sellers didn't know if it was good or bad, because it was like just dependent on the results of the election. But so ultimately, they got the house, and we did the mortgage for them. But it was just funny, some of these clauses that you see that a little atypical from what might be in London or Guelph or our neck of the woods.
Yeah, it's working in political office, especially in Canada. I think it's different in the United States in this regard. You're certainly not doing it for the money. You're not doing it for many other reasons other than you believe in a cause. You believe in your elected member that you're working for. And certainly the party certainly plays a role in that. But one of the sort of downsides is that the job security is, and the issues that surround your employment are much different than, say, a corporate role where there's more stability and there's more certainty in terms of how things are going. And obviously, your boss could be riding high in the polls and be top of their game one day, and then the scandal breaks the next day, and then there's change, and then obviously if there's changes at the top, that impacts you and your role as well. So it's a tough business, and I really do admire folks that get into it. I think they are there for public service reasons and doing all the great things that are so important to running our country's governments. They often don't get as much credit as they probably should, but anyways, that's just the world we live in.
Did you see a lot of changes with I'll say the increase in social media? Like, was that thankless job now even one step further, where it's just that public bashing that you see, right or wrong? Like, I'm not typically one to jump on and start bashing anybody, let alone politicians for a decision they made. But I'll do that privately.
So it was less of an. I think it was just starting to become a challenge when I was there. So I left political office kind of around 2008.
Okay.
So the social media platforms are really starting to become central to our politics in and around that time. The Obama election, I think, was generally regarded as like the Twitter election, and that was 2011 or 2010. In any event, my dates might not be perfect here, but that's sort of the time. And then the Trump election is the Facebook election, and then it's just kind of continued. But yeah, I think it's increasingly made the job of elected officials much more challenging. I think for two reasons. One is, there's the attention span of folks, of voters, is is shortening, and that's in large part because of the influence of social media. So there's so media covering politics, like traditional media covering politics, has to play to that shorter attention span. So that's, I think, generated a so a less need for substantive, conversations around complex issues, and more kind of gotcha coverage of small issues that maybe get the clicks that other more substantive coverage doesn't. So I think that's one challenge we're seeing. The other one is, I would just say more of a polarization of the electorate into different camps. So there's, and I think this is probably more of an issue south of the border, but increasingly becoming a challenge in Canada, where you're having people that just, because of what they're consuming on social media, which is all fed by algorithms, and it's sort of curated to, maybe some of their, just kind of a lot of negativity, and things that keep you online, because it just sort of reinforces a view of the world that may or may not be completely accurate. But it is polarizing people, and so there's less room for negotiation. There's less room for compromise, because there's a lot of your voters may not want to see you compromise with the other side, or and certainly the criticism and the critiques you're getting as an elected member, because people are being fed these these stories and this content online, which may not, again, be completely accurate, is, I think, another challenge. The last thing I'll say is this is the smartphone revolution we've had now in our society. Everyone's, if you're a public official out at a public event, you're basically under the assumption that you're being recorded by someone. It's always being recorded. There's nothing off the record. That's, and sometimes that's been a helpful thing, because it's kind of brought things to light that are probably needed to be brought to light. But you're really never able to take a full or take a day off, or be absent from that public conversation, because people can record you and share it out. And yeah, so sometimes your worst days become become something that everybody sees, and that's a challenging thing. That's, coming back to getting people to serve in public roles and elected roles. That's a huge challenge, because if you're a very successful person like yourself, Brad, or coming from the corporate world, and it's a lot to go through. To often you're taking a pay cut, but also you've got to deal with some of the public challenges as well. So yeah.
It was one of the things I was most disappointed with. So I was nomination chair for one of the political parties, and I won't say which, but based out of Guelph,
Yeah.
and it was for the national party,
Mm.
and we had, I guess we had six nominees. We had five or six nominees, which was a great number.
Yeah.
We were coming off a very big win provincially.
Yeah.
So again, gathering momentum, having
Yeah.
having that previous win, and the level of support that came down from the at the federal level
Mm.
was minuscule.
Mm.
I would have thought that they would want to support any fledgling candidate
Yeah.
who had put their name forward,
Yeah.
to say, listen, here's the topics, here's what you're going to be asked typically on any of these platforms, and if things don't go great this time, we're still going to support you for the next 2, 4, 7 years
Yeah.
to get you back up here, because you've put your name forward. So
Yeah.
let's support it. And I was just really surprised that they didn't have that set up already to go. It's one of the things that I'm advocating for locally within One
Hmm.
Point. So because we want to support realtors of all stripes,
Yes.
regardless of political affiliation, but just say, hey, you know
Hmm.
what? Here's what you're going to be asked about housing. Here's how we can back you. It's
Yeah.
typically not going to be monetary, but
Hmm.
at least know that you've got the support of your
The local
colleagues.
association. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we'll see where that goes.
Yeah.
Uh, a
Yeah.
lot of
I
changes at the,
I
sorry.
was just going to say, Brett, we obviously do a lot of work with realtor associations, and that's a big part of my background. I've often thought that realtors make fantastic candidates for public office. in large part because, like as you know, they're so engaged in the communities, they're so active in the communities, volunteering, but also just depth of knowledge about the community. That's like your business, right? Your business is knowing the community, knowing the local market, knowing the people that live there, and all of those things are inherently very important to being a great public official and elected representative. And so, yeah, and we started to do some of this at provincially, and I think it's, as you said, continuing with One Point and others, encouraging more folks in the real estate community to step forward for public office. And I think the great thing about it is we're seeing more of that happen now. And I'm sure you have friends, and I have friends who are stepping up and doing that. And they're taking a pay cut, and it's not great for business, but it is great for their communities, and they're doing a fantastic job. So yeah, I agree. It's a tough space to get into, but we certainly need good people in those roles.
Yeah. And when are you running?
You know what? I always tell people it's more of a lifestyle than it's a career choice.
Yeah.
You're on call 24/7. You're on the road. If you live outside of Toronto in Ottawa, you spend as much time probably at airports and train stations as you do at home. So it's a very difficult thing I think for anyone to undertake. In my case, it's I've got a young family at home, so it's almost a non-starter for me. Maybe one day in the future, once my kids are older, we'll start to think about that kind of thing, but certainly not for now. How about you? Are you gonna step forward and run at some point?
No,
No,
no, I'm good.
no interest at all.
Zero.
Yeah,
I'm happy to stand back and support
yeah,
and then give my suggestions behind the scenes. But yeah, it's no, not looking to get into that
well,
sort of thing.
the political sort of in the democratic, our democratic system needs great people behind the scenes just as much as they need those great folks in front of the camera. So I hope you'll continue to do that as you go forward, because I know you've been a
We hope
great
so.
volunteer and asset to whatever campaign or individual you're supporting.
No, we try, and if nothing else, just uh, even though we are lobbyists, I guess ultimately,
Mm-hmm.
um, you know, I think anyone who's lobbying in our realm,
Mm-hmm.
it's from the right place, and it's just like, hey, you know what, we need housing, because ultimately, you know, adding housing supply is just a necessity. It's
Yes.
um, not necessarily something that is going to make me a gazillion dollars or anything. It's just, it's not my factory. It's not whatever that's building these things. It's
Yeah.
trying to get for our clients to just have a place over the roof over their head type stuff. So
Yes. Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been really interesting to me, because I've been in the sort of advocacy industry now for, as I said, better part of 20 years. And certainly for the first 15 years of that work, housing was what I would call a second tier issue, where it was something that, elected officials and others talked about, but it certainly wasn't healthcare, it wasn't education, it wasn't transit or transportation. It wasn't the economy, it wasn't jobs. Like it just wasn't in that top tier mix. And starting in around, I think 2015, 2016, 2017, that all changed. And that's all because, to your point, we had a huge surge in demand, coming from lots of different sources, and the supply of homes wasn't there to meet it. And we've continued to struggle with that issue ever since. There's been just not enough. And despite, I think, let's give credit where credit's due. The best efforts of governments, I think, at federal, provincial level. Obviously, there's a lot more work to do there, but there has been efforts made to improve things, and we're still, I think, facing a lot of challenges. To me, that illustrates the depth of the issue that we're in. What, in particular, I mean, we can talk about the new bill that the Ford government's introduced just last week or 2 weeks ago. Another great piece of legislation for government. I think Ford government's probably one of the most pro-housing governments provincially we've had in years, certainly in Ontario. And they've introduced, gosh, 8 or 9 bills now, all focused on housing, reducing red tape, speeding up approvals, all those great things. And yet, Ontario is struggling on the housing start front, which is in part why you saw the other announcements coming out last week on the new HST rebate and the help for BC relief municipalities. And it speaks to, we're trying to unwind a system that's literally decades in the making in terms of, things like the Planning Act and other pieces of provincial legislation, which have contributed to the huge amounts of red tape and slow approvals that we're in. So, I think it's a top tier issue now, Brett, because to your point, it's impacting people's lives in a fundamental way. It's delaying marriages, it's delaying, when people are having kids, delaying what kinds of jobs people can take because they can't afford to move to the communities where these jobs exist. And that's why you're seeing, Prime Minister Carney and Premier Ford stepping up with these really significant changes, like, this billions of dollars now for housing coming down the pipe just last week. I think speaks to the seriousness of the problem that we're in now on housing supply and affordability.
So just a massive number of comments back on that, because I think it's a great statement. Yeah, we created Georgian Huron Developments back 2014 because it seemed like every single offer, it was our client and 24 of their new closest friends offering on the same property, and we knew it wasn't sustainable. We had one purchase in particular. It was one of our agents in our office, Ellen, and she had taken our clients and she came and asked specifically. She goes, "Listen, they keep getting beat out. They're going to go way above the list price. I'm not comfortable." But we walked through and said, "Okay, well, if they've got the down payment, and they've got this, and they've got that, then and they really want this house." And it was on Gosling Garden, and I think the list price was 300. Okay, and they decided they're going to go to 400. And at the time, that was insane, like insane. And anyway, they lost, and not only did they lose, they lost by $75,000. It ended up selling for $475, right? And I might be off by a few dollars, but it was like they were 100 over the list price and lost by 75,000. Like it was insane. We're like, okay, what do we have to do to ultimately help our clients? Because that's effectively what we want to do. It wasn't that meeting, but it was a couple meetings, it was like, okay, well, if we don't control the housing supply, we know there's demand. Like that was not a non-starter. Like, okay, so the demand is there. How do we create supply? And effectively we said, okay, well, if we're not at the development stage where we're actually bringing on, land to build on, and then we couldn't find a builder that we really wanted to work with, or that wanted to work with us. So I went and got my Terrion license and created Kingwell Fine Homes. So ultimately, it was okay. How do we get from this point to this point? That was 3-4 years before really it entered the thought process of some of these politicians. And I've had conversations a couple times today with different people, Dustin Davis, who you know well. But we talk about mindset.
Yeah.
And if the mindset of what the elected officials are trying to put forward, or at least what they say they're trying to put forward to their constituents as they make these election promises and that sort of thing, if that mindset doesn't trickle down to the planning department,
yes,
that are actually going to enact this stuff, then it doesn't matter, because there's a reason why Guelph has a reputation as being a tough place to build houses, right? And so regardless of what Mayor Cam can say and talk about, and you've been in the meetings with our roundtable where it's usually the last question. I'm like, what is your current mindset at the planning department? Because I need you to tell me that you're trying to add supply, because every meeting I have with the planning department and their the different departments that feed into that.
Yeah.
It is not what you're saying at that level. It
Yeah.
is
There's a
it is
disconnect.
still the old mindset
Yes.
of, 20 years ago.
Yes.
And in other municipalities, it's the reverse. The planning department's very progressive, and they're like, okay, we got to do this, we're going to do this, and
Yeah.
we're going to do this,
They want to get it
and
done. Yeah.
they want to get it done. And we say, okay, what do we have to do? And they're like, oh, you know what? If we do this, 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 and this, and that, like, this is going to be great, and this is a wonderful project, and we want to see this on,
Yeah.
like, because we're like, we want the path of least resistance. We want to move this forward quickly.
Yeah.
What can we do to put this? Like, we've got investors that are like, get this done yesterday.
Yeah.
And so
What do you think, Brett? What do you think is at the heart of like the differences in, because they're in Ontario anyways, they're dealing with the same sets of rules by and large. I mean, there's obviously some rules that are unique to each municipality, but what explains a cultural difference from Guelph to another area where development's just easier to do? Is it just like what I see? I think that's an issue that we're trying to figure out ourselves as a firm and working with clients,
yeah,
because it's not necessarily a policy issue. It could be there's a whole host of things that could be driving that
yeah,
kind of behavior. So what's your take?
yeah. So, well, I'll finish the story real quick. So
Yeah,
again, it
sorry.
goes so they say, okay, we want to see. So we went to them and we said, okay, here's three kind of options. We can go single detached, we can do townhouses, or we can do a mix of like townhouses, houses, and apartments. And like that one, we want the density. We're not going to be happy without the density. It goes before council, unanimous decline on the design that they're planning stuff. So again, the disconnect between what the mindset of each is. And I'm like, listen, if your planning department is going to put this together and you're going to decline it, would you do me a favor? Just skip the middleman and fire all the planning staff and hire them in your likeness. Because ultimately so my thought is if you're going to advocate for anything, it is to advocate toward best practices. You need real life examples of here's a city that was having an issue with this, and whether you have to go to the US, you have to go to Europe, you have to go wherever, but like
Yeah.
where can you find the examples of best practices?
Yes.
And there was talk about in Niagara Falls, or not, sorry, Niagara Falls, the other way, Collingwood.
Hmm.
And what Collingwood would do, because they wanted to develop in a certain direction, so they said, okay, we're going to service down this road.
Hmm.
It's going to do a couple of different things. One, it's going to expedite the development.
Yeah.
So, because all these builder developers have been sitting on this land for the past 15, 20, 30 years, not doing anything. So it's going to either ruffle enough feathers that they're going to sell to somebody who wants to do something,
Yeah.
but it's going to increase their value, because
Yeah.
now it's like, hey, you know what? The municipality is
Can
serious
develop.
about building,
Yeah.
right? Let's go.
Yeah.
And it's going to add to the sprawl, but at the same time in the direction that we want. So it's going to be
Yeah.
controlled. And we're going to have the infrastructure around it, like the fire department, like everything's going to work together, right?
Yeah.
Um, and we're just gonna go. And if
Hmm.
they still don't want to build, yeah, they're going to sell, or they're going to go like, hey, you know what? Now it's here,
Yeah.
right? Because we're going to send them the bill, right?
Yeah.
And if it's anything like any of the other places, it's about $2,500 a linear meter to service these
Hmm.
roads. So
Right.
all of a sudden you get a bill for your share, so half, right? That's a sizable dollar figure. So if you don't have the resources to build right then, you put it up for sale and bring
Yeah.
in a builder that's like, hey, you got shovel
Gives
ready, I'm
capital.
I'm I'm good to go.
Yeah.
So that to me is an example of best practices that some municipalities could look at.
Yeah.
Um, but what type of other best practices can you put into the mind of a CAO or the council and say, listen, you need to reward, because there's no reward to a building inspector that assists a builder, right, or works with a
Yeah.
builder.
Yeah.
Okay, there's only a reward for something if you miss it, right?
Yeah.
And so to say, okay, I find 8 builders this amount of money, and it's like, hey, good job, you've been doing your work and all this sort of stuff. So I can quantify that because of the number of fines or the number of delays that you've instituted.
Yes.
But a building inspector that's like, hey, you know what? This wasn't quite this, but I worked with the builder and we got this done, and it progressed that much quicker, and they were happy, and everybody's happy, and you know, like
Yeah.
that's night and day.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
you yeah,
I
you talk to
was
any
going to say they're
builders,
yeah they're being incentivized to manage risk as opposed to encourage
yeah,
and support development, which is the not necessarily the opposite. You would not what you want to do both, and both should be incentivized. But you're right. It's very lopsided the other way. And I think that the culture of risk aversion is something that permeates a lot of planning departments across Ontario, where they're worried about from an inspection point of view, it's health and safety. But I think the higher you go up in these planning departments, it's it's criticism and negative feedback coming back from council itself or the community, right? Like
yeah,
the NIMBY voices here, I'm sure, we know have an impact on the decisions that are getting made in these planning departments. And so there's this, everything is public, you're right. The consultation process is very public. And that's a very tough process to go through. So, one of the things that I know one point others talked about is that how can we simplify this consultation process on some of these projects so that yes, there's some level of consultation where it's appropriate, but it's not being done in a way that's unnecessarily slowing things down or creating the kind of conditions in terms of discussion of the project that are just leading towards like, okay, well, either we're not going to pursue it at all, or we're going to pursue it at a scale that's really not profitable, or it's not even having an impact in terms of bringing more units online.
yeah. But even at the official plan level, right? The amount of time that's spent on that and the amount of consultation that they bring in specialists to talk about all those sort of things, so they can work on their master traffic study, their master infrastructure plan, all these different things, and it all goes into the OP, so the official plan. And then builders get that and they go, okay, this is the official plan. So I look at this intensification corridor or basically where they want to build, and they go, okay, this fits in exactly where it is. This says we can go to 10 stories. We can go this. There's two instances that I can immediately basically point out in the city of Guelph where it fit exactly what was outlined in the official plan that council had put together. And it goes before council, and they're like, yeah, you know what? 94 units, that's a lot. If you can just scale it back to 88, right? And it just seems like that number is so random out of air. Like it was like, oh, the one that Habitat was working on, where they wanted to do 10 stories, that it fit the 10-story model that had been outlined in the official plan, that had been talked about during the whole process of this uh, new comprehensive zoning bylaw changes, right? And they scale it back to 8. That project's now been on hold for 2 years because they're like, okay, well, now it's not financially feasible, even for Habitat at 8 stories, because we lost all these extra units. So, all right, so now we've got to get rid of the apartment model. We'll look at stacked towns. We'll do this. We'll like it's just and having to go completely back to the drawing board, and that's just a council that's like mind-boggling. Cam's entire election speech last year or last round, right? And I can say this a little more freely because he's decided not to
Not
put his
for
name in for
re-election.
re-election.
Mm-hmm.
But his whole thing was, okay, great. I feel fairly confident that I'm going to get back in.
Yeah.
I need everyone to focus on getting like-minded counselors now because I just spent the past 4 years banging my head against the wall. Let's not spend the next 4 years banging my head against the wall. And I need people that are going to support a vision and not just turn everything down or whatever just because someone else voted yes, that they have to feel like they have to vote no. Like it's backwards.
Why don't you say that? And I've seen this in other places where we're doing work, where you'll have quite a pro-development mayor or a mayor that's really interested in and looking for ways to get more housing built. And increasingly, they run into barriers being put out in the way and obstruction, not obstruction, but resistance coming from council. And I think that probably speaks a little bit to our municipal democratic system, and that people are casting their votes probably slightly more informed in terms of who they want as mayors, given the role, and a little less so about local councillors. Local councillors are just getting, they're getting a lot of, they're getting elected with like 25% turnout. And a lot of those folks vote in every single election. So it's kind of a lot of folks coming back to the ballot box on an ongoing basis. The power of incumbency at a council seat is like, very, very strong kind of compared to some other places. But I think, that's in part why the province looked to address that. I know it's a little controversial, but the strong mayor powers, and aligning those strong mayor powers with things like, the province's goals around housing was in part, I think, to address some of those dynamics. But you're right. It's, getting, if you can get both right, like a council that's really behind housing and a mayor that shares that priority, you can get a lot of things done.
Yeah. Well, you should never hear from the planning department, ooh, well, if we do it this way, we don't have to go before council, because they have zero faith that council will do it correctly.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they just make I don't know, I'm not going to slander anybody, but
yeah, they're very, councillors, and it's the councillors are responding to the system that they're in. They're in a system where, again, a small number of voters are determining the outcome. And a general rule of politics is politicians want to get reelected every single year. So that's something that we were constantly working from. And so if you know that there's an issue locally that's going to mobilize that small group, then you're very responsive to that. And that's in part why you're seeing a lot of councillors come forward and say, okay to this development, but it's got to be much smaller, because then they can take that win back to their constituents and say, hey, we had to do this, but I fought for it. And so, yeah. So the, incentives, we're talking about incentives here being so important. The incentives on the councillors staying elected is a little bit misaligned to what we want to get done on the housing front, at least. And hopefully that changes, certainly as this continues to move forward. I know we talked a bit off the top about increasingly the issues that we're having on housing supply and affordability are at the local level of government, and so fixing those, I think, is paramount, and hopefully we can continue to make progress on that through One Point and other associations we're working with.
Oh, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So this, I'm fuzzed here, but the Building Homes, Strengthening Communities guide that you had a very large part in putting together and designing and working with One Point to put this out. Again, you should be very proud of that and the work that you're doing with the association. But what are the key points that you take from that really everybody should read and look into, regardless of if they're a lobbyist or not? What are they should be taking out of that and going, you know what, I really need to make that point to my municipal councillor or MPP?
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing that stood out for us in the report is that, generally speaking, and keep in mind that the Building Homes looked at 10 municipalities across sort of the One Points area, which is largely central Ontario for folks that may not know that. So kind of in the west, we're looking at Kincardine, right east to Bracebridge, and kind of a lot of communities in between. And generally speaking, I think the report found a couple things. Number one, well, we're going to give some background on the methodology. I guess that's important here. So we assessed the housing policies of each of those 10 municipalities against CMHC's Housing Accelerator Fund 10 best practices. So the 10 best practices that they put to municipalities in order to qualify for funding under that program, which are generally regarded to be quite progressive and pro-housing supply type policies, then you could get funding. So that was our methodology. So we assessed the policies against those 10, and we found that by and large, a lot of municipalities are making some good decisions. Like there's progress happening everywhere, and that's I think that bodes well for the future. I think to a municipality, everyone is recognizing that the seriousness of the challenge that we're in, whether it's on the affordability or the lack of supply. So that's kind of our starting point for the conversation. From there, though, there's a wide discrepancy for our, in terms of municipalities that are I would regard as being quite progressive and advanced. So Guelph would be one where council and the mayor have made some pretty pro housing supply oriented decisions over the last number of years, and we'll see how that translates into more starts over time. And others have not. I think the one area where I would say that there's kind of some consistency is in the report we're tending to see the more urban the municipality, so the denser the community, the more incentive there is for the elected officials to be taking some of these pro supply decisions. So things like enabling 4 units as a right in the municipality. That's one that's been talked about a lot. The province looked at doing that province wide, and they kind of stepped back from it. They said, we're going to do 3 units, and then we're going to let the municipalities decide for themselves. I think in the report, 3 or 4 out of the 10 have done that, and several have not. So that's certainly an issue. Things like targeting DC relief for the types of homes that we really need in a lot of markets, so that missing middle type housing. In fact, I was looking at a bunch of data last night across a bunch of municipalities. In some communities, like starts are actually not falling off a cliff. In places like Toronto, starts are down quite a bit. And particularly in the apartment segment, like a lot of the apartments, that segment's struggling. In other places, apartment starts are up, but it's mostly rental units that are being built. While the segment of single family and semi-detached and townhomes is actually declining. So it's like 7 out of 10 every 10 units being created as an apartment right now in a lot of communities. So that's something that if you're a young family or even a downsizing buyer, and I'm interested if this is your experience with your development company, Brett, there's just not a lot of options out there. So what kind of tools can municipalities use to kind of incentivize more of that kind of missing middle building? We certainly think in the report, we talked about this quite a bit, using targeted DC relief for those kinds of homes makes a ton of sense. So it evaluated 10 of those policies, and generated some not really scorecards, but somewhat report card style analysis of those 10 against each municipality. And it's really, I think, generated a lot of really positive feedback, because at the end of the day, municipalities are interested in getting this issue solved for their voters, and they're looking for solutions. And so at one point, it's been able to kind of bring forward recommendations to every single one of those municipalities. And we're already starting to see some of that, I think, have an impact. But also the conversations that are happening now because of the report have been really encouraging.
No, that's good. Did I read the report correctly? Like Stratford had 0 building permits? Is that like it was?
I think so. I'd have to go back and look, Brett.
Like they dropped off 100. They dropped 100%. So I'm guessing that math works out to 0.
Yes.
But yeah, no, our development company, when we take on investors and that sort of stuff, it sounds awful because it's basically dollars and cents, but it's if you're going to lose money on it, you're not going to build it. Period.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we weren't in a position where we had too many people looking to build the McMansions that people talk about. So we went the other way. And although we're not looking to, we're very specific as to where we would look to build apartment units or stacked towns. In all honesty, for what they are, it was the only thing that was affordable enough to justify moving forward with that project. We had a couple of instances where like a triplex might fit because of its location, and so we were pretty excited about taking on that investor's project. But for the past few years, and I did a podcast with Daniel Chason out of the Burlington Hamilton area a couple of years ago, and I was trying to go back and find the actual recording of it, but I first of all, I brought zero energy to this podcast, and I apologize to Danielle if she ever watches anything. I was just as monotone and um, forgettable as anything. But anyway, um, I, I basically spent the entire time saying costs are here, sales price is here. You can't build anything right now, so expect the next 2 years to be like zero construction.
Yeah.
And you're going to have construction companies that are going to be finishing up the different projects that they're currently engaged in.
Yeah.
And, with maybe a little more insight or looking ahead, I could have said, and maybe they won't even do that, right?
Yeah.
But even us, like we had 16 units that we built out in Ingersoll, and 4 of those ended up not closing.
Oh, wow.
Right? Like that's a huge, huge
Yeah.
number, and put us in a really precarious position. Um, but it's scary. Like, and we felt for the buyers. It wasn't like they just stopped talking to us. It was like
Yeah.
all of a sudden rates shot up. Their costs went through the roof in terms of what their monthly payment was going to be, or they no longer qualified, or.
Yeah.
So we tried to do what we could to help them, but you know, and that's been en masse now
Yeah. Yeah.
in pretty much everywhere,
Yeah.
depending on what the units are.
Yeah.
So for us, when we look at the incentive programs that were available um, to assist, it was just better financing. So we took on some of the purpose-built rental stuff through the MLI Select program.
Yeah.
And to do that, you needed to do some density.
Yeah.
So again, you were doing stacked towns or apartment units and that sort of thing.
Is
But
that can I just ask you a quick question about that program, Brett? Because you've got experience with it. Is that a program that could be prioritized towards ownership housing? Because it's a you said a purpose built rental program, and I've heard that as
yeah,
well. And it seems like it's been enormously successful. I think it's one of the reasons why you're seeing so much rental apartments being built now
yeah,
in Canada, despite the fact that rents are falling, right? Like
yeah.
rents are falling.
If
So
if you if you had government backing to come in and say we are going to help with the underwriting of vertical construction financing, you're 2 steps ahead, right? Because now all of a sudden, so I'll give you a quick example. So the MLI Select program for one of the projects that we were looking at, and it was basically determining if we were going to go affordable or just try to do all market product, because we could go MLI Select or we could go conventional. So if we went so either way, like regardless, the costs at the end of the day, and what the value at the end of the day is going to be roughly the same at like 12 million. Okay. So conventionally, we could get a mortgage of about 9 million ish. Okay. So we could do $9 million mortgage, or through MLI Select at the back end. And I'm talking like when we refinance it and pay out the whole thing and then start renting them. You could get about 11 million. So I could get $2 million more. Okay. But because it's now an insured product, the rate is about 2 points lower. Okay. So that 2 percentage points plus my amortization with the MLI Select is 50 years as opposed to say 25. Payments for $2 million more were $9,000 a month less. $9,000 a month, right? And it's a no-brainer. Like, yes, I will do affordable. I will have an affordable component. I will hit all the thresholds that I need to. We'll have some energy efficiency
yeah,
worked in there. We'll hit
components.
our
Yeah.
points, and away we
Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
But it we do a lot with Habitat for Humanity. So we are the construction company that helped build the stack towns in Fergus,
Very cool.
and we love our relationship with them. and they are obviously owner occupied, so they don't do rental, right?
Mm.
So they do, but they do an affordable, and then they have a market component. Basically, the market component, any of the, I'll say, profit or the costing there
Yeah.
allows them to support the affordable side.
Mm.
So it's just it's a hybrid subdivision,
Right.
and when you look at that, $404,000 in the city of Guelph is the maximum dollar figure that they could sell a unit for, um, and call it affordable. 404,000. There's nothing that I can build for 404,000,
Yeah.
right? And maybe now with the DCs being that much less and HST out of it, maybe, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's uh, it's tough.
Yeah.
So they would have to greatly subsidize
Yeah.
the cost of just the construction to say, okay, we're selling these at 404.
Yeah.
And so again, are you helping people get into an affordable unit, if it's a 540 square foot single bedroom? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know,
Yeah.
right? Like the people that
Yeah.
need the help with affordability are families of four
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
five people.
Yeah. People
So
that are looking to start their lives. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
And can't afford to get into the market.
yeah. I've seen the
Because
posts. Your hockey's expensive. I know baseball was expensive. Like it's like you're going, like you need help
yeah.
with affordability.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. And Brett, do you think these new programs have been announced by the current government, the new HST rebate? It looks like there's some DC relief. Do you think that's going to have an impact?
100%.
Yeah.
Right. So again, with the development charges, what's great about that is it will have a larger impact than the HST potentially would have at on the affordable units.
Yeah.
Right. So because DCs predominantly are the same, there's not as a percentage. So again, if you're saving $40,000 on a $400,000 unit, um, yeah, that's a marked number. And HST, so again, they had made announcements about purpose-built rental and HST a while back, so we were able to flow through the tax, a while ago. But on the owner-occupied side, we were already getting a $24,000 rebate. So
24,000. Hmm.
it was pretty close to where the HST was already,
Hmm.
and so now those lower priced units, if you're saving on the DCs. But I'm fearful, and I'd love your insight on this because you deal with multiple municipalities and people across the province. Would you say that there's going to be a have and have not? Because I truly hope that municipalities pick up the flag and run with it to say, okay, we want the money. Like, what do we have to do? How do we get builders and developers to put forward their applications so that we can say, yes, this is the infrastructure we need. Here's how this is going to be laid out. But I don't know that all these municipalities are
Well,
going to be on
yeah,
board.
yeah. So, and we heard this publicly, but some of the mayors I've talked to have said similar things in private. The one of the requirements, and we don't know all of the requirements on the program yet. It's still, I think, early days in terms of the program being rolled out. Just
That,
what
that
was
sounds like
kept.
typical Ford, but yeah.
Yeah, the Carnegie. Yeah, just it's kind of like these high level, and they're like, well, we'll let the officials kind of work all the details, and we'll let you know what those details are. But we do know that there's going to be some matching component to, so the municipalities have to cut DCs in order to get the funding. And I think the capacity to do that across it varies significantly across municipalities. And municipalities, the ones that I talk to, they're facing a lot of pressure fiscally in terms of especially the revenue and their costs, and in large part because they're dealing with things like opioid crises and homelessness crisis locally. Those are driving huge holes in their budgets around social services and healthcare, things that traditionally they've not been responsible for. Like healthcare is not an area of municipal responsibility. So you talk to
Yep.
a mayor like Cam Guthrie, and he'll point it out to you when they're doing their budget review. Like this is a huge new cost for us, and when we're having to go back to the property tax base to cover it. So there's already that sensitivity, and I think that that capacity to cut DCs is going to be limited. We'll see what they do. I think there's opportunity, and this again, it comes back to our what we say in our report. Perhaps there's some targeted relief around certain unit types where maybe we can improve the math and improve affordability for those projects and for those buyers. But I do think it's really going to vary. I guess time will tell as more of the details come out around the program and to what extent municipalities have to cut DCs in order to get the funding. We'll see what kind of information's in the final program details. But yeah,
Well, like a city of Guelph,
yeah,
as an example. So they have a program right now that if it's an affordable unit, okay, and they have here's what that looks like for rental, and here's what that looks like for purchase, right? But if it's an affordable unit, they will cut 100% of the development charges. And then they'll go, okay, well, time out. No, so it's 100% of our portion, but the schooling portion, like the education component, is so again at the highest level, you're dropping from 80 to 40, and then you look at the 40,000, you're like, well, it wasn't that long ago. In all honesty, that
it
the
was
whole
10.
thing was the whole thing was 40,000,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And like there's other municipalities, and we try and have our investors look at across the board where it makes sense for them to build and to buy and all that. There's other municipalities right now, like their development charges are literally $2,500, right? And that's everything across the board. And we said, okay, well, walk us through how we like, because again, we're going to service the lot, which is about $40,000 a lot, okay, to bring services ish, okay. And they're like, oh no, we do that. Like what? Yeah, you tell us where you want it and what you need, and we'll bring it to your lot, and then you tie in from there. Like so, you're only charging me $2,500, and you're not going to charge me the 40,000 to service it. Correct. Okay. So we're huge advocates. They're like, we need housing, period. Right? Like we'll spend it to get it.
and it's if you listen to some of the background on why they brought those programs forward, like yes, there's an huge affordability component. I think that was one of the main reasons. The other reason is, Ontario is facing this really problematic crisis in housing construction, and there's thousands of jobs are at risk in a lot of these sectors. If there wasn't some substantive action taken to kickstart, starts and construction, get those sales offices moving. A lot of people were going to get laid off. So I think that was the other issue they were looking at. I know it could probably was a little more pronounced in the GTA than it was maybe in some other parts of the province. But yeah, so many people employed and working in those trades, having those starts continue to stall that way without some kind of action, was I think something they had to do. No, what's interesting though is, Brett, are they going to keep it going forward? I know the HST program's time limited. It doesn't sound like this DC relief funding is going to be in perpetuity. It sounds like it's probably going to be maybe a medium term kind of program. But
Yeah. So they're talking. Well, they set out the finite amount, which 8.8 billion isn't really a finite number in my world. That's yeah. Anyway, it's a big number, and I don't think people understand how big any number that's a billion starts. Anyway, but no, so they're looking at 10 years, but the same thing with the accelerator fund. That was to go through 27, 28, and now all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, are we running out now? So we set this target, but if we're already hitting that, it's tough, tough to say. And my fear is, So on the purpose-built rental side, my fear is that the MLI Select program will be changed come June. That's my prediction, and I wish it wasn't. But so we're trying to push everybody and everything to try and get all our applications in ahead of those potential changes, because they always it seems like any time that they do make a change, it's June. So we're trying to go there. But if they so to go back to your original question or a couple questions ago. So you're asking about the what they can do, and let's not call it MLI Select. Let's just call it construction financing. But if CMHC got into that world and said, okay, we are now going to insure construction financing, and you know that's a monstrous savings, because now those are insured deals, so your rate comes down. Like it's
You're
a far
saving the
better world.
premium and the rate. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so we had financing lined up for a couple different projects, and the credit union that we were dealing with backed out, right? And it's a 2x4 upside the back of the head. Like like you get to that point thinking, okay, we've got things done, and we're ready to go on the financing side, and all of a sudden they go, oh, okay, no, we're not comfortable with this area, or we're not comfortable anyway. So it's happened, and it's insane, the trickle, the spiral effect that takes. So now all of a sudden, if you have that insurance backing, where maybe it takes a month longer to get approved, because that's just the way of the program. But now all of a sudden, all these lenders, they're lining up for that, right? Like they're fighting one another to get that, because they love having an insured product.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Because they just wrap it up and sell it, and move on
Yeah.
to the next one.
Yeah. 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 Exactly. Yeah. It'd be interesting to see whether or not they get into that as maybe a secondary measure, after some of this has run its course. And as I said, I think the mixed problem continues. The lack of ownership units and family size units that are coming online is an issue that they're going to have to tackle. I know people in Ottawa and Ontario governments are seeing that, and so hopefully, Brett, to your point, they're bringing forth some of these. Like the financing thing is such an area where they could have a maximum impact. I guess there is a risk side to that too, like even for government. But that's something, given the situation we're in, maybe they can, well, hopefully they can endure. They can endure.
Yeah. I look at, and that was part of the reason for the roundtable in the first place, because in talking to MPP Schreiner, and
Yeah.
he wanted some feedback on that. I said, that we need to basically bring every level of government together, because what is happening federally, where they manage, the CMHC, which is a crown corporation, and then you have provincial levels of different things, and you have municipal. If they're not talking, they might come up with a great program, but ultimately, if you can't get it financed, it's going to be tough. Like national lenders are just coming around to some of these ADUs and ARUs that are, because again, they were okay, great. They're a stopgap, and they fit a purpose. But ultimately, if you can't finance them, the number of people that can pay cash for those sorts of things is minuscule. Yeah. So again, if you want to quickly add housing, then you need to have all levels of government working together to say, okay, we're going to implement this program, but we're also going to back it, and we're going to support builders, or we're going to support whomever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been an incredible couple of weeks in terms of new programs that are being brought forward. I think it just speaks to the scale of the challenge that we're in. All of the global economic uncertainty is certainly making things so much worse.
Yeah.
And fingers crossed, some of that starts to subside, and we can reach, at least on the economic front, a bit more stability. And I think that'll go a long way to maybe improving the outlook for some of these challenges we're having, Brett. But
Yeah, I look at, to me, as, and my background is economics, so that's I look at that, and I hear oftentimes what Sean Cathcart at Korea talks about, and his economic outlooks on stuff. I honestly believe that the Bank of Canada was asleep at the wheel,
Yeah.
and it's that's why it's so important to me to have these regular conversations with people like yourself,
Hmm.
and other realtors, and I say boots on the ground, right? Like, people that are out there dealing with people on a day-to-day basis and seeing what's going on, uh, not necessarily living in their White Castle in Ottawa or Toronto, right? Because if you look out your window and you only see one aspect of what's going on in the world, that becomes your entire world, and you don't necessarily like, if the housing market is robust and everything's going great in Ottawa, and things are, but it's its own little bubble. Then when you see what's actually happening, where grocery prices are going up and housing prices are going through the, like, it's insanity. And for them to say, you know what, I think interest rates should stay at 0.5%. We'll just leave that to where it is for the next 2 years, and that's to me what absolutely like destroyed the market was their inability to see what was actually happening.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
again, maybe it's not fair to point the finger solely at them, but um, they could have eased the brakes with a rate increase, or at least a few things. Now for them to come out and go, you know what, housing prices are way overpriced. We need to do what we can to bring those housing prices down. It's like, no, you need to help build it. And so it's funny that the Carney government and the Ford government have come out like a week or two after the Bank of Canada announcement and said, okay, here's what we're going to do to help builders, because ultimately that's what has to happen. If you're going to add supply, you need to do it at the source, which is building houses,
Yeah.
and let's assist in that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I did a post today too, just for my own edification. I wanted to see that this was actually taking root. And so I went into the London MLS, and I went into the Guelph and Fergus Salora MLS, and there are dozens of examples of builders that have immediately dropped their price based on the HST savings. So that's great. Um, yeah. So that, again, it is having an impact. And we're seeing that with some of the builder prices, and so hopefully we're heading in the right direction.
Yeah.
I'll wrap up on this. I hope you take it as a fun question, because that's really what it's geared toward. But with the podcast being called the Naked Real Estate Podcast, what do you focus on? And I know how busy you are with kid sports and that sort of stuff, but what do you do on a day-to-day basis for yourself that you feel helps you look better naked?
You know what? I try to eat better. Gosh, that's a great question.
Is
Unfortunately, with
it?
kids,
Hopefully, just a fun question.
yeah, yeah. With kids being in activities, it's tough. Honestly, it's so tough now. I used to be like really heavily into the gym and working out a lot. But not so much. It's tough to find the time. But certainly eating better, that's a big one. Not getting enough sleep, that's another one. But no, I'm all about chasing my kids around the province these days for their activities. I coach their teams. I spend a lot of time at the rink, at the field. So that keeps me pretty busy, keeps me pretty active. But it's certainly, once my kids are older, and I probably shouldn't wait until that long, but anyways, getting back into that gym and that mindset around staying a little more physically active. I like be a big sports guy. I played rugby, played hockey, and then all that changed. When you have that first kid come through the door. So,
Yeah,
anyways, no, it's a work in progress, Brad. Let's just put it that way.
yeah. Well, I told Dustin if he wants anybody to keep him accountable. So we did keto together, and actually I
Oh yeah,
watched him do it, and I jumped into it, and that would be 2018.
right.
And so if you ever want to have an accountability group on the eating side, then let us know. But
Yeah, for sure. That
yeah,
I've heard that that's a good one to get on. I'll have to check it out. I'll have to check it out.
it. I, I was down, I guess, about 50 pounds in about a year or so.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it was a big jump, and then yeah, it just slowly progressed, but
Cool.
it's not the easiest thing to maintain. But um, I'm a yeah, I pray at the keto
At
altar.
the keto altar.
Yeah,
That's cool. That's cool. That's
exactly.
cool.
Anyway,
Cool.
well, thank you so much
Yeah.
for
Yeah. Thanks for
talking
having me
and
on, Brett.
speaking
This
so
has been fun.
candidly, and we'll do this again. Hopefully, not too far along, but no, I
Yeah.
really appreciate it, and good luck with the renovations because that's always fun.
Thanks, Brett. I appreciate
All
it.
right,
Thanks for
all right.
having me on, sir. Take care.
Cheers. Thank you.
Bye bye.